Hi, I'm here today to talk a little bit about our stories for the first day of World Childless Week, and I'm joined as well by somebody else. There's two of us talking. So I am Stephanie Phillips, the founder of World Childless Week. I run a couple of support groups, and obviously I've gone through cancer. And the other lady who I'm speaking today is Karin Enfield. She comes through us as the operations director of Gateway Women, and she is a cancer survivor. So we want to generally talk about how cancer has affected our childlessness in different ways. So good morning, Karin. How are you?
Good morning, Stephanie. It's so lovely to be here. Thank you for having me here with you today. And yeah, to talk about this, this kind of tricky subject, isn't it? It's as you said, I'm indeed a cancer survivor. And for those of you who don't know me, maybe just a short introduction on myself before we go into today's topic. As you said, my name is Karin Enfield. I work as the operations director for Gateway Women, together with the founder of Gateway Women, Jody Day. And I am indeed a cancer survivor. I had cervical cancer at the age of 33, which left me childless. As a consequence of that diagnosis, and I'm now 8 years on in my post-cancer journey and in my childless journey, and I really want to thank you for the opportunity to talk about this almost like this taboo subject, as much as childlessness is often considered a taboo subject. So thank you very much for having me. I feel privileged to be here with you.
Well, no, I think it's good that we get the opportunity to talk about cancer because, as you say, it's a taboo subject. But so is childlessness, and people automatically think when you say you're childless that it's down to infertility, but infertility is a small percentage. It's 10% of why we're childless, but cancer is just one of those subsections within infertility. It can cause infertility. But it's not a big reason for everybody, but it's an important thing that people need to talk about because cancer itself is so hard to deal with. To then have to deal with the fact that you might never be a parent afterwards, it's like a double whammy. Just when you're grieving your body, causing you problems and failing on you, you're then grieving the fact you may never be a parent.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for bringing that up, because that was exactly what it was like for me as well. I was given, the day I was diagnosed, I was given a date for my surgery for the hysterectomy because the cancer had spread, that the only way for me to be treated was to have a radical hysterectomy. And that the surgery was planned 3 weeks after my diagnosis. And I was asked once by my oncologist that do you have a wish for children? I said yes. I said I do. I would love to become a mum one day, but I said if I now choose to postpone my treatment and try for a baby first, and and risk the chance of losing my life and put a baby into this world, but not being able to be around to raise that child. I said no. I said my own health is, is at this moment in time. I choose my health, and we'll see what happens afterwards. And he said, oh, and he casually mentioned, oh, well, you can always just adopt or try for surrogacy. And said, so he said, we'll plan the surgery, and that was all that was said about my future after the surgery after losing my womb. That was all that was said about it. Nothing was mentioned about it. So after my surgery, I was just blown away by the fact that I was a cancer patient, that my body was in pieces. And like you said, I was mourning the loss of my healthy body. I was mourning the loss of my womb. I was mourning the fact that all of a sudden I had to undergo treatments and many surgeries in the years to come afterwards. I don't think I ever realized for the first 2 years what the long-term consequences of that surgery would actually be. So I didn't even think about my childless grief when I was actually processing the fact that I was a cancer patient.
Yeah, there's so much when you hear the words that you've got cancer, it's no matter how much you think it might be, to actually hear those words is so crushingly defeating.
Yeah.
And you can't think. That was all my head was consumed with when I found out, you know, and I was in, like I say, a completely different situation to you, but you have to put your health first. And in a way, you're actually you're not sort of stopping yourself, I think it's the right way around. You're actually putting the chance of being a mother as second place. But in a way, by not going forward to try and have a child first, you're actually also putting that child, the love you would have as a mother for that child first.
Yeah.
Because you're actually thinking you don't want to bring up a child into this world that you may not be there to care for. So you're actually, when people say, I've got a mother's heart, that is a real motherly thing to do. In a way, do you know what I mean? It's because you're actually putting your thoughts on that child of thinking, no, I need to get my health first, and then maybe things will happen in a different way. But again, for him to just drop in the adoption and surrogacy, you just think it shows how little awareness there is.
Oh, there truly
Yeah.
is so little awareness of it. And what I found shocking afterwards is that when we try to explore the alternatives after a hysterectomy, try to explore the alternatives that are left as a couple. And my husband and I, we live in Belgium. I'm from Holland, my husband's from England, and we live in Belgium. And I was treated in a Dutch hospital. We live close to the Dutch border. And even between those three countries, between England, Belgium, and Holland, the rules and regulations around surrogacy, adoption, foster parents, and everything like that, already the bureaucratic policies and the red tape that we've encountered in all three countries, because we were even willing to move to a country where it would be easier for us to either go into surrogacy or down the path of surrogacy or the path of adoption. And at one point I was like, what are we doing? What are we doing? So when we were in our most desperate moments to find alternatives to actually fulfill our wish to become parents, we kept shifting our boundaries, and it took over a part of our lives. It kind of took away from the fact that we both needed to deal with the fact that I had been ill, that I'd nearly lost my life after my surgery. I woke up in an intensive care unit, and something went horribly wrong, and they had to bring me back, which fortunately worked. But you know, so we've had many hairy, scary moments, and we just started to focus so much on the hope that we still had left inside of us. Because you know, I don't know if you have experienced that. I'm curious to hear. But after I got out of the initial woods, basically of the survival after my cancer surgeries, there was a time where I felt almost invincible. That I felt so strong and so like I can handle everything. I can handle the world, and I became so almost lost in my survival mode. That it kind of took away from what I really needed to do, and that was heal, and that was accept, and that was learn to grieve, not just what I mentioned earlier, not just my body and the loss of my health, but I also learned that I had to allow myself to start grieving for the loss of the chance of motherhood. And I love how you just described as well that when that question was asked in that treatment room about my wish for children, I actually thought of my unborn children. I actually already thought of them or about the consequence of my decision there and then. And I love how you bring my mothering nurture heart, or my nurturing mother heart, I should say, into that, and to really already think of the future the type of future I may have given my unborn children had I chosen to try everything I could have done within my power then to put a baby into this world, and risking losing my own life over that. So it's a complicated minefield, to be honest with you, where you find yourself in. And I think it's just really important to also make people aware, and especially medical staff, nurses, doctors, oncologists, to make them aware of the long-term consequence as well of what cancer does to women who are still of childbearing age. And it is not just women who have cervical cancer. I've spoken to many women who have been treated for breast cancer, for leukemia, for any type of cancer that they have been treated for. Because regardless of your type of cancer, chemotherapy, radiation therapy does have an impact on your fertility. And I find it so incredibly astonishing that how little knowledge there is in the medical world around the long-term effects that childlessness after cancer may have on women and partners.
And the thing is as well, like you said, they only look at the actual physical effects if they look at it and if they consider it. They don't actually think of the psychological effects, or they think of the effects going towards, again, that they're orientated around the cancer, element, not necessarily the removal of your chance to be a parent. And I'll just jump in now and I'll briefly explain the situation I've gone through. It's always so different, and then I think we'll carry on, because I'm interested in certain aspects that you've brought up already as well. So for my story, I found out at the age of 39 that I wouldn't be a mum, and I'm now 53. My experience of cancer only came in the last 12 months when I woke up in pain, and the pain increased, and I didn't know what was going on. It was in my stomach. Eventually went to the doctors, and they rushed me straight to hospital that day. A scan revealed I had this mass that needed to come out, and bizarrely as well, 3 weeks from the day I woke up in pain, I was having a full hysterectomy to remove this mass and everything else. And then 2 weeks after that, I was pulled back in, and they'd said originally it was a dermoid cyst. The dermoid cyst, slow growing. There's something that is more common than we realise, and usually they're benign. It's not a problem. We take them out, and they're gone. Mine had got so large that it actually attached to part of my pelvic region. And as such, where it attached, it had turned cancerous. So I'd suddenly gone from waking in pain to having a hysterectomy that was unexpected to being told I had cancer. It took a further 5 weeks before they made a full diagnosis, and then I started the chemotherapy. 6 months later, I was told chemotherapy hadn't worked. I had a small tumour growing back in the same region, so I went through radiotherapy. And I'm now in the stage where I'm waiting for my next scan, which is in September, just before Childless Week. So all of this cancer didn't mean, it wasn't the reason for me being childless. But I suddenly sat back and thought, gosh, it's taking away everything that supposedly, and I don't believe in this myself, but so many people put the weight on, all of this body part that actually creates your womanhood, that creates you, gives you the opportunity to create a child. And for years, I've been saying, I can't wait to go through the menopause. I can't wait for the monthly reminders that my body is not working, to cease, to stop, to not be there anymore. The pain that they caused me, the illness they used to cause me, it'll be gone, it'll be great. But all of a sudden, this menopause was forced on me rather than me just gently going through it. And that was it. I'd suddenly gone through and straight into, hysterectomy and straight into menopause. And it was like, this is really weird. This is not how I expected it to happen. And it felt strange. And I thought, and even then, even like I say, because my childlessness really sort of came into play over 10 years ago, but it was still in my head that this was part of that journey, because I had to accept now that it was gone. I was in menopause.
Yeah.
And it was really weird to sort of compare childlessness to cancer. And people say you can't compare it. But I thought, well, you can, because the way I dealt with my childlessness was totally different to the way I dealt with my cancer. And I briefly said earlier, it's like from when I was a child, it was the big C.
Yeah.
Cancer was the big C, and it was scary if you said that word. And I mentioned to you just before this recording, Karin, that the big C now, in a way, is childlessness. But with childlessness, I went into myself. I didn't tell anybody. I was embarrassed. I was ashamed. With cancer, and obviously everybody deals with it differently, I straight away went, I'm telling people because I want that support. And I told people the same day I got the results. I went on Facebook. I made it public I had cancer.
Yeah.
And nobody was embarrassed. Nobody else sat back and went, oh, what do we say to her? Nobody didn't know what to say. Everybody came forward and gave me their love and support. So it was completely different to the way I dealt with my childlessness. But my childlessness, I think I was still grieving.
Yeah.
There's aspects of it that I'll be grieving for life. But cancer, as far as I'm concerned, I'm going to deal with it. I'm going to get over it. And if I still have to deal with it going forward, I will deal with it. But it hasn't got the same impact, the weight of grief that my childlessness has. So for me, the big C is childlessness. It's not cancer.
Yeah.
Cancer is a pain in the ass. I'm going to kick its butt, as we all are doing. Do you know what I mean? But it's a totally different way of dealing with a major milestone in your life. And it still has an effect on it, because I think, should I be grieving that those body parts have gone away? Should I be grieving that I don't have, anything there anymore? But does it really matter if it's giving me my health back? But it's questions that came in my head at the time, and they're still there, and they haven't upset me, but they have made me stop, sit back, ponder, and think maybe at some point it will come into play, but it hasn't yet. But it's still part of that. And the one aspect actually which was hard, this is where I get emotional, is my husband turned around and said, this is it now, I know we can't have children. And until that moment, he'd still held that little iota of hope, because he's only just now starting to grieve the way I did 5-10 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's actually been harder on him than it has on me, which I didn't see coming until he broke down, and that is what makes you realise that cancer can affect us, and in so many different ways in relationship to our childlessness. And this is something people don't always see. See, it's good I didn't wear makeup. And I'll joke and I'll laugh, because I try and do positivity in my life, because I do believe in that. But there's still moments and aspects, and I think that's what people think. They think you get over your childless, you grieve it, you move on. But it's moments of seeing my husband upset that bring it full back in full force into your face. And I'm sure you've had moments again where you've revisited that and felt that pain sort of resurface.
Yeah, absolutely. And Stephanie, thank you for your vulnerability. I'm very moved, and you touched something very deep inside me, and I'm sorry to see you upset, but thank you again for being so vulnerable, even on screen here, because this is such a big part of it. And what you started off with was that you were ready for your menopause to arrive. And what we see with many women who are at the menopausal age, and who are childless by circumstance, that for many women that the menopause is almost like the final stage. And so, okay, after the menopause, then that's what we see. This is what a lot of women then realize. Okay, there is no more hope left. And so I can now start grieving. So many women who are childless not by choice wait almost for that. I would say almost called magical menopausal moment to arrive, because that it's almost like it gives them, it allows them to then start grieving for what they've lost. And for me, I was 33 when I lost my womb, and the parallels that I hear when you were talking about that menopause moment, I grieved the loss of my periods, and how stupid as it may sound, because trust me, my periods were awful. My periods were painful. They were intense. They were heavy. 7 full-on days every month, cramps and everything. I was cranky as hell, and all of a sudden I didn't have periods anymore. And I was 33, and I just I felt so robbed of my femininity. I felt so robbed of my womanhood, and also there at how that impacts. And also knowing now, it's like, okay, yeah, when I'm getting to my menopausal age, I'm not going to be menopausing because I'm already in the middle of it.
Yeah.
I'm 41 now, and I'm already going through a big part of it. It's a lighter version of it, but it has already started, and it's just, it feels so weird for that to happen at this stage in my life when all my friends are at completely different stages. So it's just really something that I had also never anticipated. And I love how you describe childlessness as actually being the big C, because for me it's been exactly the same. People have no issues with offering me support. When I told them that like you, I was also very open about my cancer diagnosis. I literally asked people for support. A friend of mine put up a schedule, like a babysitting schedule for after my surgeries, because I wasn't allowed to do anything for 6 weeks after. And my husband works on the weekend, so his boss gave him time off, but he eventually had to go back to work. So we had like round the clock care system. People came and stayed with us. They cooked for us. They took care of us. And nobody bat an eyelid. And nobody felt uncomfortable talking about my surgeries and the impact on my body and stuff like that. The moment we actually realized that we were at like I said, 2 years later, that we realized, okay, we also need to start grieving around childlessness, or need to start, but we were already grieving. But when we realized that that's what we were doing, when we then reached out for support, we were met with silence. We were met with awkward responses. We were met with people who started to avoid us, and people who did not know what to say. So indeed, it became the big C in our lives as well. And it wasn't cancer related, but it was childlessness related. And it's been, for me, it's been shocking to see how high the volume was of that radio silence that we were met with. It was just incredible. It was very painful. And for my husband, it was very much that during my cancer period, he was like, I'm calm and focused. Let's focus on getting you better. We will get through this together. And it wasn't until we did a letting go ritual of our childlessness, when I wrote goodbye letters to my womb. I wrote goodbye letters to my body, to my 30s. I always say that I feel robbed of my 30s from post surgery. It took me a good 8 years to get back into some normal way of life, of living, and so I feel robbed of my 30s. So I've written many letters of goodbyes as part of my healing journey. And it wasn't until I actually wrote a letter to say goodbye to my unborn children, that's when my husband realized that we really had to say goodbye, and that he too had to say goodbye to them. Because until then, it had been my grief, it had been my journey, and then it became ours. And it was such a pivotal moment also in our marriage, to kind of recognize that grief with each other, and also to find each other again in that. And it's been instrumental in our healing together. And yeah, so it's just, again, it was what you said as well. There's so many aspects and so many factors that are taken into a cancer diagnosis. From the moment you hear the word, nobody can actually explain to you, or nobody has actually explained to me, what else is going to be thrown at you, living through all that we've been through.
It's really hard. You say obviously it took you a few years to go from sort of like dealing with the cancer to suddenly realising you were childless. And like me, you announced to people that you had cancer to ask for their support. Did you announce to people, that's it, we can't have children, or did you just feel like you didn't need to, or you just didn't want to?
I think because I think I genuinely, honestly, I think I lived in denial for the first 2 years after my cancer.
But the 2 years, but the time after that.
Yeah, but as strange as it may sound, I almost found a comfort in being a cancer patient. And this may sound really weird, but how I mean this is that it almost gave me permission to be sad, to be vulnerable, to be rebellious, to be angry, to be upset with the world, and to it felt like almost like a safety blanket,
something to hide behind, but your child was there, but you could use cancer as the word that people understood almost.
Yeah, and because people responded to that in a supportive and empathic way.
Yeah,
it felt safe. It felt like a safety blanket. And the moment that I changed the wording from cancer to childless, and that I was grieving, and then I started sharing indeed with people. And when people say, "Oh, are you still not over the cancer thing?" I was like, well, first, I don't think you ever get over it. It becomes part of you, and yes, you move on from it, but you don't get over it. It's not the flu. It has long-term effects. But I've integrated that into my life, and then the moment it shifted from cancer to childlessness, and then actually the long-term effects of that, and the incredible pain that came with that, and the void that it left inside of me, and the moment I started talking about that again, what I said earlier, I was met with misunderstanding. I didn't get empathy. I got pitied. I got pitied, but I didn't get the empathy that I got when I was talking about cancer. So for a while, I think I may have even dressed up my childless grief as still grief for cancer. I may have milked it a bit.
No, but it's understandable because you want that support, but you couldn't get it through being honest and explaining what was really hurting inside. And that again, it's awful that we feel we can't express why we've had this pain, why we're grieving.
Yeah.
And to use cancer of all things as an escape, as a cloak, to use that as a safety barrier, it's awful that people have to feel in that situation, and that's why, like you say, cancer, we can talk about it, childlessness, we can't.
Yeah.
It's awful. Did you, when you were healing and you were in hospital, were you on oncology, or did you have to go to gynecology for it? Because obviously that's something some people have to deal with, is being on a ward where the maternity unit is beside you. Did you have to go through that, or?
I specifically requested this prior to my surgery. I don't know why, but I did say, don't put me on a ward with pregnant ladies.
Okay.
I don't think that's very, very fair.
No.
Because I remember when I was first told my diagnosis, I was at a regional, at a local hospital where I got the diagnosis, and then I was sent to a cancer, a specialist cancer hospital, or a hospital that specializes in cancer care. So I had to go to a different hospital, but of course my local hospital rung ahead to the specialist hospital and said, okay, we have a patient here, and we're going to send her to you now. Could you please, make availability in your schedule to see this patient, to talk about her treatment plan. So in a daze, my husband and I drove from one hospital to the other. And when we arrived at the gynecology department of the hospital, and I was just bawling my eyes out. I'd just been told I had cervical cancer, stage 3 cervical cancer, and it's like my life had just been thrown upside down, and I come in bawling my eyes out. I think I scared the entire waiting room, and it was full with pregnant women. And fortunately, within 5 minutes, we were put in a room where we were seen. So they handled that well at the hospital. But because of that experience and how confrontational that felt for me at that moment in time, as dazed as I was walking in there, I remember so vividly seeing nothing but pregnant bellies, and how painful that was at the time. So pre-surgery, I asked for that. So they put me on a ward with some elderly ladies who had also undergone hysterectomies. And I think the ladies were in their, mid-60s. And of course, they got visitors from their grandchildren. So like, oh, hi, Nan, hi, Nana, blah, 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 how are you, da-da. And there I was lying there, 33 years old, my body completely cut open, and never going to be a mum. And it's like, oh, I'm also never going to have my grandchildren visit me in hospital. So what I have done since is I've spoken to my oncologist, my oncologist at the gynecological department of the hospital, how painful this is actually for women who are going through these treatments, and if they are then going to be childless as a consequence of this, how painful it is to actually sit in a waiting room, even for your appointment or your checkup appointments. So what they have done at the hospital that I was treated at is that they have created a separate waiting room, especially for these appointments. So for follow-up appointments for women who have had cervical cancer or gynecological cancer, they now have a separate waiting room, so that you're not sitting amongst the pregnant women who come for their regular checkups with the gynecologist, but that you are now placed in a separate waiting room, so you're not confronted with that. And for that, I'm very grateful that my hospital actually listened to that. They followed up on that.
That's a real positive to come out of that, because like you, I remember being told, oh, you might wake up next to basically the maternity ward. You might be down there, but thankfully it wasn't the case. I woke up on a separate ward somewhere else. But like you say, the thought of waking up and hearing other women either going into labour or babies crying and stuff like that, on top of everything else, it's like you say, it's like the cherry on the cream on the cake. You just don't need it. It's extra pain.
And trust me, Steph, I know plenty of stories of women who've gone through what we've gone through, who've actually had to experience it, who've had to endure such an experience. And I remember it was a surgery, I think 2-3 years later, a follow-up surgery of cysts growing, and they needed to be removed. And I had a catheter post-surgery, and it had, and before you're allowed to go home, when they remove the catheter, before you're allowed to go home, you need to be able to empty your bladder yourself. So they do a bladder test with like an ultrasound to check if your bladder is empty enough, so that it's functioning again, to avoid infections. And I remember this really, I have no other way to describe her, but as a very masculine female nurse came in to do the ultrasound, and something felt odd about her. I didn't warm to her at all. Something, all my radars went off, like, doesn't feel safe. And then she was like, right, I'm just going to do the ultrasound test, and she said, oh, you don't have a womb anymore, so you're a man on this machine. And then she literally just did the ultrasound and said, yeah, you're good to go. And I just laid there. I was so stunned. I was like, did she just say what she said? I was like, I'm a man now because I don't have a womb? And that for me was the moment that that's when I filed a complaint with my doctor and said, never again. People need to know about it. And that's also what kind of helped me also open up and start sharing my stories also towards hospitals. I even give lectures at hospitals now to oncology nurses and staff to talk about what not to say to patients patients like myself, to help them, educate them a little bit more. And so, yeah, I'm very lucky that my voice got heard at the hospital. And like I said, they have now a separate waiting room. The nurse got a right telling off, and I hope she's learned the lesson. I haven't seen her ever since, so but I hope she's learned her lesson. But yeah, I think there are many stories like this, Steph, that would leave you flabbergasted.
Yeah,
if you hear.
I've heard some horrendous stories of the way people have been treated, as you say, coming out of operations, to hear babies crying and have nurses. I've heard of them saying, like, literally, as they're going, somebody had the mask being put on them and they were falling to sleep and going, oh, well, at least you don't have to worry about having any more kids. And then she fell asleep. And there's been, really.
Oh my God.
So she went to sleep thinking, hearing this, not being able to remark, not being able to respond, but it's the first thing she remembered when she woke up.
Oh my God. And it's so important to go to a happy place before you go under. And that's, oh my God, what a
I've really heard some horrific stories, like you say, of what women have been told by doctors and by nurses, and it's usually along the jokey form of, you won't have to worry about any more kids, do you know what I mean? But they don't ask if you've got kids in the first place.
Oh, it's
And because, like you say, people are embarrassed, they're ashamed, they don't have the courage or the strength to answer or say something back at that time. And so people get away with it. And like, luckily you've made positive changes, but not everybody
no,
is in the
know.
right place to do that. And it's like the
I
same,
know.
you know, you, after hysterectomy as well, waking up and seeing grandkids coming to visit. And I think that's the same thing with the menopause, whether it happens naturally or forced, like myself. I'm at the age where my friends are starting to become grandparents. So you're sort of, yay, I don't have to have the monthly reminders and the pain and the anguish and that causes, but I'll never be a parent, I'll never be a grandparent. So when you're trying to sort of move on to that next phase of your life with positivity, as you say, some people see it as a, like, you know, a stepping stone further.
Yeah.
But then you hit the grandparent stage with so many of your friends if you're in the 50s or slightly. So it's a continual thing again.
Yeah.
But that's taken us away from the cancer. But there are so many aspects that come out of how it can affect your childlessness.
Yeah.
Be it gynecology, or like you say, if it's not because of treatment, it actually affects your fertility as well.
Yeah. No, and
Yeah.
it's exactly for that reason, and I'm still reeling from the examples you just gave about the responses that that lady got. For me, it's exactly why I do what I do.
Yeah.
It's why I joined Gateway Women. Is why, well, the reason I joined Gateway Women was to help me with my grief process. I did the online B program that Jodie Day created, and that really helped me to kind of go through my grief cycle that I needed to go through after my cancer grief. So it was really a lovely, yeah, it really is. And it's as weird as it may sound, but I'm so grateful. And it was such a lovely way to embrace my grief and to make space for my big C grief, and also to make space for the big C in my life, towards my family and friends, towards health professionals, towards healthcare workers. And yeah, I really am. It's a really big drive for me as well, is to keep talking to the medical profession about this as well, because people need to hear this. People need to understand that what is being said to a woman in such a vulnerable place.
Yeah.
When you said earlier, when you got the diagnosis, your whole world was turned upside down. My first thought was when I got the diagnosis and we were driving from that one hospital to the other, and my husband just became this kind of rock, and he just went nothing but focus. And I was just a gibbering mess. I'm gonna die, I'm gonna die, I'm gonna die. I remember ringing my brother. He was the first person I called in the car between those two hospitals, and I said, I've got cancer and I might die.
Yeah.
That's the first thought you have, and you don't lose that thought. At least I didn't lose that thought for a long time. And even still, I'm 8 years further down the line. I'm healthy as far as I know, but I'm healthy. I still have moments where, ooh, that fear, that confidence I had in my body, it's never come back to the level where it used to be. So I'm still wary of it. I'm still cautious of it. So yeah, so when women are in that situation in such a vulnerable state, and you're in shock, you're scared out of your mind, and then to be dealing with remarks like that, yeah, no, so that's for me, that's what drives me the most to do what I do, is to speak up on behalf of women in that situation. It's yeah, it's a topic I'm very passionate about, and it means so much to me. And even if I just help one nurse or one doctor to treat a patient that they see after speaking to me differently, yeah, already I'm just, then my mission has been accomplished.
I think that's a really important thing, because I'll quite often say to people, I'll say, but if I share my story, who's it going to help? And I said, it only takes one person to read your story, whatever it's about. And if that one person finds some strength, some confidence, something that is positive out of that to move forward, then you've done your job. And like you say, that one nurse, but she might come across one person a week, but that could be 52 people a year that she treats better.
Yeah.
And it is really hard. It's the hardest thing to do, is to actually get out there and start talking openly about it. But it gets so much easier each time you do.
Yeah.
And like you say, if you can make that positive difference for anybody, then that's, it almost like, you know, again, swaying off the top, but that could be your legacy because you've helped one person. Because we only need to help one person in this world, and we've done good. But you can guarantee when you speak out, you connect to a lot more than one person.
Yeah.
And it is giving each other different voices. And I think the more of us that talk about how different things have affected us, you know, when you first said you wanted to sort of speak about cancer, and I said, oh, please, can I come in on this and do the talk with you? Because it's so important. And I think anybody else who wants to do similar going forward, it doesn't have to be through World Childless Week. It could just be on their own timeline. It could be a 5-minute chat on their timeline. Or it could be through World Childless Week, or anything else, through Gateway, whatever. You don't even have to be on a public forum. Like you say, in the closed support groups, you can help other people.
Yeah.
And that's so incredibly strong and important and just brilliant. Do you know what I mean? I can't think of the words, but it can just make such a change for so many people. You know, and I'm grateful that you're doing that in the hospitals, and you've helped those nurses to learn a little bit, to think a little bit, and pass that on in their everyday work to other people. So, you know, from me to you, thank you.
But you're most welcome, and thank you also for being so open to share this in World Childless Week, and to bring cancer into the agenda of this week, because it is such a hugely important topic to talk about. And so thank you for embedding my story in this. And I will keep speaking up on behalf of everyone who either doesn't feel comfortable yet or doesn't want to speak in public. That's also fine. You don't all have to become public speakers. That's absolutely fine. And I love how you also address people, Steph, when to say to them that, you know, even if you share with one other person, you could already make a big difference to that person's life, how they then respond the next time they hear a story like this, or maybe, you know, give someone else the same advice. So don't ever forget what one little drop can, the ripple effect of one little drop in the pond can have. And if anybody does want to share their stories with either one of us, please reach out to either myself or to Stephanie, and we're here to listen, and we're here to help.
And that's all we can do for each other, isn't it? 10 years ago, I was carrying in that shell and hidden. And it doesn't mean to say that everybody who feels in that dark place will start talking out, and it doesn't matter. But it's sometimes, I've even said, like in a support group, you just send somebody a hug on a post. I've done it before when I've been low, do you know what I mean? In years gone by, I just said blah blah, and you can get people just saying hug, 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 and those hugs actually physically reach you.
Yeah.
You can feel the love and support from people who understand.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not about being public; it's doing what you are comfortable to do. But
yeah, and also one really important thing to add to there is be open to receiving that support, because it can feel incredibly lonely. And that you feel that you're the only person in the world with these feelings that you might have around your childlessness. Please know that you are not alone. There are many communities out there, amongst which the Gateway Women community, who are here to help, and that offer is genuine. You know, I remember that when I first got support on my childless grief that I was so looking for, and that I hid behind the cancer shield with. And the first time I actually received the support that I so craved for, I think I cried for 4 days, and that I no longer felt alone. And it was such an eye-opening moment and a life-changing moment. That moment has really shaped my journey as where I am today. If I didn't have that support, if I didn't get that support back in 2016, which is it's just 4 years ago, if I look back on where I was then and where I am today, yeah, my life has changed completely, because I also was open to receive that support. It has been instrumental in my journey.
No, I totally agree with you, because like I said, when I first joined a support group, I was like, I'll sit quietly in the background and read. Then I sort of occasionally put a few comments on, and then I'd be sitting at my keyboard, thumping away, getting the aggression out, the sadness out, the grief out, and it releases so much to have somebody go, I understand.
Yeah.
My story's different, but I understand. And when you hear that, it makes such a difference. And I've still got friends from online, from the first support group I was in, and we call it like Childless Not by Choice, CNBC. So we're CNBC sisters. And I've got brothers as there. And I think that's what it's like, because it is an online family.
Yeah.
And some people I've met face to face, and it's an amazing feeling to meet somebody.
Yeah.
And talk to them. But like you say, just trying to find the community that you feel right in. And sometimes you have to join a few to see the one that really suits you. And that doesn't matter. But it's, as you say, being open to know that there is support available.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely
incredibly important. Yeah. Oh, thank you, Karin, for letting me come and talk on this. It's been really, I don't know what the word is, but it just feels like we're doing something we need to do by getting the word out there. And I hope we reach the ears of one person. If we reach the ears of one person, we've done something.
Yes. I love that.
It.
And thank you for having me, dear Steph. I really much appreciate it. And I'm so proud of how far we've come in both our respective cancer journeys and in our childless journeys even more. Big hugs to you, a big virtual hug to you in these strange times in this pandemic world that we're living in. So I'm sending you a massive big virtual hug. Here it comes. That one's for you. And this one's also for all of you who've been watching. Thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this. And like we said, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to either one of us. And we hope to see you soon. Thank you. Bye, Steph.
Bye.